Podcasting from Astrolab Studios, this is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we revisit sci-fi, fantasy, and just plain weird shows that have faded from the collective consciousness and didn't quite make the impact that they intended. This week, Harsh Realm, episodes 7 and 8.
God does not reserve his gifts for any one soul. Florence's miraculous ability to heal was shared by others. Women who, unlike her, lived in isolation. Women whom Florence, sensing danger, had gone to find. For here, just as in the real world, the darkness preys on the light, on the innocent, the holy. So Florence ran, praying she was not too late.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that is recording in Harsh Realm this week. Jordan, what have you been up to in Harsh Realm?
Well, I'm not in the nice part of Harsh Realm, so it's mostly been making jokes about eating dogs and looking for gasoline. What about yourself? You're in Santiago City, aren't you?
Yeah, I started a bakery and a family. It's real nice.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, things would be going a lot different for you.
Man, this is the better part of Harsh Realm, let me tell you. I'm Luke. That's my co-host Jordan on the other side. If you're hearing some slight difference in our audio this week, it is because Jordan's out of the city, so we're recording remotely, hence being in Harsh Realm. And I think this should turn out just fine, though. If not, you can email us and tell us how much you hate us. Now, we're nearly finished watching Harsh Realm, Jordan. So I wanted to do something kind of now that we're getting close to the end here. I'm going to hit the reboot button on the old Continuum Drag console here, and we're going to reboot Harsh Realm as a blockbuster feature film.
I'm excited. You know what? The last one when we did Tech War, it really turned out to be a real blockbuster, and I think everyone loved it. So I'm hoping we get similar results from the most bizarre cast ever.
Yeah, I mean, this will be interesting. I had a lot of trouble with this casting, actually.
So did I.
It's tough to put people into these very cardboard cutout roles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good thing is it can really go any way because the characters are nothing, right? So
sky's the limit, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Tom Hobbs, our hero, question mark?
Yeah, I thought of two actors for this. The first person I thought, he's kind of a somewhat meek, kind of blonde guy who maybe would, find his way as the series went on. And that's, I'm going to pronounce this probably wrong, but it's Domhnall Gleeson.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he might be okay for the role. And then a secondary, and you'll see what you think. My second pick is kind of taking a different direction, would be Michael B. Jordan.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I see where you're going for. I also, when I'm thinking of it, I'm just kind of like, who is kind of a generically handsome every boy?
Yeah, exactly.
So I went with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Okay.
Who's, I think, a great actor. I quite like him, but I feel like if you need a guy who doesn't understand what's happening somewhere, he could do a good job with that.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then I went with Aaron Tyler Johnson.
Oh, wow. I know who that is. That's a different pick. I wouldn't have thought of that.
I mean, if you don't know who that is, because I wouldn't know his name off the top of my head, it's Kick-Ass from the Kick-Ass movies. But the reason I thought of him for this is, have you seen the Godzilla reboot?
No, I have not.
He basically plays a generic soldier in that movie, to the point where I watched the entire film and I didn't know it was the same actor from the Kick-Ass movies. He's just like a shaved head generic soldier. So I know he can do the part.
Right, right. It's a thankless role, and really anyone can do it. Out of those, are we picking someone that we think is going to be the lead for our movie, that people are going to, like first on the poster, people are going to flock to see?
Yeah, I don't know. Who do you think? Who do you like best?
I kind of like Michael B. Jordan.
You know what? I like it too. It's probably the best piece of casting.
All right. It's only going to go downhill from here then.
Great. All right. Michael Pinocchio, the sidekick.
I didn't realize that Pinocchio's first name was Michael. I'm eight. What did we? 8 episodes in? Did they ever say Michael?
No, I don't think they ever refer to him as Mike or Michael, but I had to look into it. I had to look it up to be sure.
Okay. Michael Pinocchio. Well, I have two, again, odd choices. My first choice is to really punch up the sort of humor in the character, and my pick is John C. Reilly.
Oh, good pick. Why don't I go next? Because I actually could only think of one actor for the role.
Okay.
And I was thinking of him in more in that gruff, couldn't care less about what's going on sort of idea. So I went with Ice Cube.
Oh, I like that. That's pretty good.
Who do you want to go with for the role?
I don't know. Up to you.
Of those, I actually think I like Ice Cube for.
Okay.
I like the idea of Michael B. Jordan and Ice Cube in Harsh Realm. That sounds good to me.
Who's next on our list?
General Omar Santiago. We got to recast the villain.
Both my picks, I did not pick people who make sense for someone to name Santiago because I figured that's the character. Is apparently it could be anyone except for someone who's probably from South America. So my first pick was Chris Cooper.
Okay.
Character actor, a little bit grizzled. You can kind of see him in charge, being a little bit ruthless, having some speech, and he kind of veins are popping out of his head.
Yeah, very much a military man. I can see it.
Yeah.
I actually went with the idea that his name was Santiago, and my first pick was Antonio Banderas.
Oh, I actually really like that. That's way better than anything I picked. I've sort of recently become a real Antonio Banderas fan. I think
you've come around late to it.
Yeah. I think he's aging really well. I think he's aged into a point where I used to think he was a pretty weak actor, and now I think he's found like a nice rhythm for himself.
I think he's a good actor. He'd be great for this role.
Yeah, you know what? I'll just say real quick, my second pick was Robert Patrick, and it was at least partly because of Chris Carter, but I don't think we're going to get any better than Antonio Banderas. It's got to be Antonio.
Fair enough. I think it is Antonio. My second pick was Samuel L. Jackson, but just because I feel like that's the role that everyone would put Samuel Jackson in.
Right, right.
So I think we're agreed. Let's go with Antonio Banderas for this.
Nice.
Next up, Florence, the mute healer.
I only have one person for this, but I have a real reasoning for it. It's Canada's own darling, Tatiana Maslany. The reason I chose her is just coming off a show where she had to play 5 people with all different personalities. I thought, you know what she could probably do? A character who doesn't talk at all. And give it real something, you know? Give
her a break. Just take it real easy.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of eye acting, like silent movie sort of. Big eyes.
Well, that's it. It's not a bad piece of casting. I only could think of one person for the role either because there's not a lot to go on with it, but I decided to go with Tilda Swinton.
Oh, wow, that's really different.
I mean, I feel like if you wanted an otherworldly character, she's got that in spades.
I almost have to say I think I agree with Tilda Swinton only because I want her in every movie. I think you can't not cast her. Like, if she came into the agent said, we might get her, I said, well, that's it. That's who we have to have.
Okay, let's do it. I mean, she'd be good at eye acting, too.
Yeah, it's true.
What about Sophie? The thankless wife role? What would you call that role?
I was going to say, it's about as thankless a role as you could have. So I thought of someone who I think is the best at the business at just staring and having one tear roll down her cheek, which is, I think, pretty much all you need for Sophie. And that's Carey Mulligan. And I don't think you can beat... like every role, it's like they cast her. Like, who do we have who can just stand and look pretty and cry a little bit? And that's who it's got to be.
Well, yours is probably more age appropriate than mine. But I went with Ellen Pompeo. Do you know who that is? Do you watch Grey's Anatomy?
I know who the name is. Well, I know you really love Grey's Anatomy.
I do watch a lot of it.
Which is weird. I mean, that's a separate podcast altogether. Is your recaps of Grey's Anatomy. All 45 seasons.
I can be a well-rounded individual who watches many programs.
That's true.
Since you don't watch it, I'll kind of give you my reasoning is I feel like that show, she is constantly playing the most unlikable character who just gets her way all the time.
Right.
And I feel like that would be very useful here with her trying to barge into military offices. She'd just have a little more gravitas when she was demanding to know what happened to her husband.
I'm fine either way. I wouldn't fight over it, so I'll give you the final pick on Sophie.
I think you're right. I think yours is more age appropriate and probably better for a blockbuster. I mean, Ellen Pompeo's probably not packing the seats in. All right. Waters, Hobbs' former friend turned enemy.
I'm curious as to what you're going to pick, but I went in, again, a bit different direction. I thought really play up the sort of Weasley-ness and, what would you say, like the guy kind of playing both.
You find him Weasley?
I think he is Weasley, but they're not playing it up enough in the show, and I want to really play it up with my 2 picks.
Okay, go for it.
So my first one is Giovanni Ribisi.
Oh, that's a good pick.
Yeah, I just thought it changes the character. He's less of a tough military guy, and he's more of, as I said, a sort of conniving kind of guy. And my second pick is Ben Foster. Same sort of idea.
Oh yeah, he's not so Weasley though, is he?
He seems to like to play characters that you're really going to dislike for one reason or another.
Okay.
And I dislike Waters.
I went the other way. I went with a character actor. That's a bit of a stretch. But someone who's going to play a tough and military.
Okay, who's that?
Vin Diesel.
Ugh, barf.
I think you're right, though. I think Giovanni Ribisi is the right choice.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. That was a good call, Jordan.
Thanks.
Next up, mystery government woman, Inga Fossa. I only have one pick for this, so do you want to hear it?
Yeah, I have 2 picks. I'll let you do yours first, but let me just say before you give it, one of my picks you might agree with. One is so out there that your socks may literally pop off. That's all I'm going to say. So you give me your pick.
All right, I will take my socks off now so they don't fly across the room.
Yeah, because they'll physically pop.
My pick, I went with Gal Gadot.
Oh, okay, yeah, Wonder Woman.
Yeah, but mostly because I find her accent very mysterious, so I thought it would work well for the role of a mystery government woman. But that's about my only reasoning.
That's a pretty good pick. I went in a slightly different direction. My first pick was Sarah Paulson.
Oh yeah.
But are you ready for my wild card?
Yeah, hit me with it.
Okay. It's going to take the character in a different direction, but I think it might add a little something to the show or movie.
Okay.
Whoopi Goldberg. Would that be different?
That's interesting. I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all.
I don't think Whoopi should be in it. I mean, does she even make movies anymore?
It's a bit of a stretch. I think you're right. I don't think I'm gonna put my vote with her.
Okay.
And Sarah Paulson's not bad. Like, she's a great actress. But I think Gal Gadot's really gonna put this movie into the $100 billion range.
Wow,
of box
$100 billion. What we're
yeah. Oh, this is gonna be big in China.
Yeah, right. Who's directing this masterpiece that we've just cast?
Oh, I actually am pretty happy with my 2 director choices. I think both of them would bring very clear visions to what this would be.
Okay.
It's either Zack Snyder.
Okay, yeah, okay. That's something.
I mean, you can see that, right?
I can see
a
it.
lot of weird shots in slow motion, but it worked well for this idea that they live in a computer.
Yeah. Who's your second pick?
James Gunn.
Oh, and very timely too, seeing as he just got fired off of every movie ever.
It's true. He needs the work,
Yeah.
first of all. But also, I kind of feel like he'd put a lot of memes in it. It'd be a lot of internet humor. I think he'd put a lot of emojis on everyone's faces. He'd have a great time.
I only have one pick for this, and it's George Miller.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
This is you really leaning into the Mad Max elements of it.
Yeah, I think he would do well in terms of really creating this wasteland that perhaps Vancouver never quite evoked.
So what you were missing from this reboot is you wanted a grimmer Harsh Realm.
Well, I'd like to at least be able to see things. My main complaint of I have many complaints of Harsh Realm, but one of them anyways is it's just so dark. I can't tell what's happening.
I think that is your main complaint.
Is it my main complaint? No, I think my main complaint is how stupid and useless Hobbs is. And then my secondary complaint is how dark it is. And then my third complaint is how much time we've spent on this show.
It's almost over now.
Yeah, I know. It really is. I'm getting that feeling we have at the end of shows where it's down the stretch. We're almost there.
You just get all jazzed up.
I'm all jazzed up, yeah.
It is true. When we start a show, you hate it and you just want to quit. And when you get to the end, you couldn't be happier.
I know. I feel bad. I think as we say, ennui that that pours out of me when we start these shows. I mean, I think every time off the air I tell you, I don't think I'm going to make it through. I think this was a mistake. And then by the end, I'm like, yeah, that was fine.
Yeah, it worked out.
It worked out, yeah.
All right, who's directing now? Who do you like?
Oh, I think Zack Snyder was the pick.
I agree.
A lot of slow-mo shots for no reason.
Lots of green screen.
I don't know what else. I don't know what else stuff he does, but Zack Snyder stuff.
Yeah, whatever Zack Snyder does.
Yeah. So do you want to do a quick rundown of who we picked?
Sure. I think I have them all here. The cast is Tom Hobbs is Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
Pinocchio is Ice Cube.
Right. That's funny.
General Omar Santiago is Antonio Banderas.
Oh, yeah. I love that. That's my favorite casting.
Florence is Tilda Swinton.
Still amazing.
Sophie is
Carey Mulligan.
Carey Mulligan, thank you. I almost said Michelle Mulligan.
She's looking out a window with one tear rolling down her cheek.
Great. Waters.
Was it Giovanni Ribisi?
It was Giovanni Ribisi.
I couldn't remember.
Inga Fossa is Gal Gadot.
Yeah.
Directed by Zack Snyder.
This is it.
This is a great movie.
Yeah.
The poster looks amazing.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that this one will have a lot of zip files. A lot of little Mexican wrestler luchadors running around.
Put zip files everywhere.
All I request in the movie is this. There's a dance sequence / musical number at one point where all the zip files kind of go. You think Labyrinth with that David Bowie song with the baby. That's basically what happens about halfway through the movie. And then the other thing that happens is someone gets put on pause and we get to watch them get picked up and put into the back of the truck and they're still on pause. That's the only two things I request.
Those are good requests.
Thanks.
I like it. All right. Do you want to get into this week's episodes?
Yeah, let's do it. 107 and 108.
Episode 7. Manus Domini. Hobbs finds himself trapped in a minefield with one of Santiago's soldiers. Pinocchio grapples with the prospect of living with a handicap for the rest of his life. Florence is taken prisoner.
Maybe I should mention this at the end, but I'll just, I guess, tease it. I think this episode had two really interesting plots that neither one were realized very well, and then maybe I'll explain at the end what I thought what these episodes could have actually been.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'll sort of start us off because I think what you're saying is it does split into sort of three separate plots, but I'll kind of get us to the split point and we can kind of break off into the three individual ones.
Okay.
We kind of open, our cold open is kind of post-episode, and as usual, Hobbs is writing a letter to Sophie giving us a little bit of like voiceover about how he's feeling about what's happened this episode. And they really come in pretty heavy off the start here. I believe in this he talking about how in a harsh realm, there is a God just like there is in the real world. They lay into the religiousness of this episode very early on, very quickly.
Yeah, you're right. This episode, it's actually noticeable because there's not really, I mean, maybe there's been a hint of it before, but they really push it like that there is an idea of, maybe I'm giving too much to the show, but that this program, this video game has taken on a life of its own and things have adapted and evolved. And in that adaptation there's a higher power. Now, there's been no real, up to this point, and I believe in this episode, there's nothing really that shows that, but it is a weird thing that they push real hard. It almost feels like a very Catholic episode without any Catholicism.
It's true. I mean, I was trying to think about it, and I think X-Files had a little bit of this, and Millennium definitely did, but in a kind of a more of a Book of Revelations way. But this felt like the most Chris Carter thing where it was quite clear his sort of Catholicism was leaning very heavy into the core mythology of it suddenly.
Yeah, and also, I don't know why, but I guess there's no electricity outside of Santiago City, but they keep cutting back to Hobbs this whole episode where he's writing by candlelight, and there's just something funny about that.
He was writing by candlelight. So the episode starts off properly with Hobbs and Pinocchio chasing Florence through this like cornfield, and we kind of actually get a little more backstory of Florence in this episode. Like they say they're chasing her because they introduce she has a new ability. Did you catch what ability she has?
It was a new ability?
Well, she has the ability to sense danger.
Oh yeah, that's right. And it's funny because her ability to sense danger, I think almost immediately she gets kidnapped, and it's like, where was her sense of danger? It's not effective at all.
It's true.
But it's her spidey sense.
And what the danger she's sensing is that her people are in trouble. Yeah. So we start realizing she actually has a people she's from.
They started kind of doing a little bit of world building here that she's a member of a group called the Sisters, right? Am I jumping too far ahead?
Yeah, no, that's right. The Sisterhood.
It's a bunch of women who they're really clearly shown to be like nuns is what they're showing. And she's sort of, for whatever reason, unknown, ostracized from them, but has the same ability, which is what they all have, which is ability to heal.
And they're all mute.
Oh, and they're all mute. That's right. Yeah, none of them talk.
They seem to have a religious text they look at. That's actually where the episode's title comes from. It's in the book Manus Domini, which I guess means Hand of God. That's their healing power. And they do get a little bit into why she left. I guess their modus operandi, I don't know how to put it. They don't interfere, they just heal. And whereas Florence has left them because she feels like she needs to intervene to help people, not just like heal them after the damage has happened.
Right. I actually didn't even catch that, so good on you.
And the other piece of a little bit of world building around them is they introduce the idea that when Florence heals someone, it makes her weaker. It like temporarily saps some of her life force.
Right.
So this is kind of like builds a little bit of Florence out. I actually thought this was going to be like a Florence only episode. It doesn't end up being that way.
I thought
like
that way too.
Sort of...
I was excited. I actually wrote my first note was, wow, a Florence episode. But no.
I was let down that way too. But I mean, we do get a little bit of background on her, so it's a bit better than usual.
2 episodes from the end.
She runs off through this field, and as Hobbs and Pinocchio are chasing her, Pinocchio steps on a landmine. And then Hobbs is like, don't worry, let me disarm that for you.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, if there's one person that you'd want to disarm, the one person you wouldn't want to disarm a landmine, it'd be Hobbs.
Well, he immediately sets off the landmine,
he immediately
blowing them both up.
Of course he does. I'm surprised he didn't try to just stick his tongue on it. He's stupid.
I mean, this certainly lends credence. It goes so badly so quickly, and he's so confident when he starts.
You could actually make a montage of all the dumb things he's said and done over the course of the show, and if you just didn't fast forward to the music of Benny Hill, it would be pretty funny.
I'm going to now kind of split off, because this is kind of a good part for us to split into the 3 different characters' stories, because they don't really coalesce again until the very end. So I'm going to kind of go through each particular character's story for the episode. So it'll be a little out of order, but I think it's the easiest way to get at this. So I'm going to start with Pinocchio, because after the landmine goes off, the sisterhood finds him in the field and like drags him back to their farm because his leg has been blown off in the mine explosion.
I actually was pretty surprised. I thought they were going to do a thing where he pulls him off and neither one's hurt. But, kudos to the show. They actually blew Pinocchio's leg off.
Yeah, we get a good shot of his like severed leg while he's back at their farm. They've healed him, but they can't bring his leg back. So he's just sort of there without a leg. And his character basically kind of fluctuates between 3 things through the course of the entire episode. Extreme self-pity, just railing against God for his injustices.
Yeah.
And then there's a nice moment where he has a really, really ugly cry.
Yeah, the cry is funny. I debated making a GIF out of that, but yeah, I'll give him one thing. He does sort of self-pity himself the whole episode. However, he went into Harsh Realm because he's like missing legs and he's disfigured in the real world, and now he's gone to Harsh Realm and the exact same things happen to him. So, I mean, you get that. That pretty sucks. He's had the same thing happen to him twice.
I mean, that's the reveal. We knew he was like burnt up in the real world, but he actually talks about how in the real world a similar explosion happened and he is actually also crippled in the real world.
And what I'll say is maybe he should be more careful about landmines.
That's true. So yeah, so he volunteered to come to Harsh Realm so he would be able to get his like fully functioning body back. And that's what he's yelling at God about, is he feels like this is God's punishment for trying to cheat God out of like crippling him.
Well, you know what he should do is he should see if this is the exact same world and it's all been scanned, as they said. What he should do is he should go back to the warehouse where his body is laying in the real world, and he should get into the game and go into the Harsh Realm within Harsh Realm and then try to have a new body again. Because I'm assuming they also have a video game, right?
Oh yeah, they must have, in Harsh Realm, they've built up like a Harsh Realm.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, you bring up a good point about them scanning his body into this. Didn't the last episode say any of your ailments that were scanned in?
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. Well, what this is it's a clear case of 2 different writers, and they're both writing the script at the same time. They're not paying attention to what happened previously.
They're setting rules for a world that the other one doesn't know about.
Exactly, yeah. But yes, you're right. He should be in this world wheeling around,
So the sisterhood is taking care of him, more or less. It was really just one sister seems to take care of him, and they kind of do this really awkward like thing, like maybe she's falling in love with him, but they just write female characters so badly, never really makes sense.
It's a lot of like eyes at each other, and you could see it right away. It's like, well, she's kind of young and cute, so she must love him because he doesn't have a shirt on.
Yeah, exactly. And after, he's been there, she gives him a crutch, like trying to encourage him to start walking around. And there's a scene where he's like walking around with his crutch, trying to find his stuff, and I'm like, oh, he's just going to get out of there now. But he just like finds his gun, and he gets really angry because there's no bullets in it, because he had just got up to go kill it. Like, he was just trying to find his gun to commit suicide.
Yeah.
When that doesn't work, I assume they were going to move on from that like idea that he wants to kill himself. But when that doesn't work, he then walks on his crutches, like hobbles back to the minefield to continue to try to commit suicide on another mine.
Was that what he was doing?
Yeah, he's back there. I think he kind of says it as he's looking for a mine, because if they've hidden his bullets, he's just going to go try to blow himself up again.
Right. But it doesn't happen. He doesn't blow himself up.
Yeah, it's a very self-pitying episode for him. But when he gets back to that field, he sees Santiago's army driving around, and he kind of has a change of heart. He wants to go back and defend the sisterhood.
Right.
Which is, I guess, kind of his arc for the episode, is he is mostly just self-pitying the whole time, and at no point does he seem to get over it. He just at some point decides he needs to go defend the sisterhood when he sees that Santiago.
Yeah, there's no real motivating factors why he does that. It's just like, he just does.
That kind of, I'm going to move on because that kind of catches him up to like the end of the story. Basically, that's all he does all episode is complain, try to kill himself, and that's pretty much it.
That's it.
That was his. Was this one of the storylines you liked?
Well, no, it's I can explain here. Here's what I think the storyline should have been, which is it should basically be a real version of High Plains Drifter. You ever see that movie? 1970 something.
No, I haven't.
Clint Eastwood movie. And the basic plot is guy comes to a town. He finds that the town's in bad shape, and why it's in bad shape is these other guys, sort of like outlaws, are coming and constantly torturing the town, stealing and blah, blah, blah. He teaches them how to fight back, and that's the big climax of the movie is the town fights back. this one guy shows them how they should have a backbone. And I thought that's what this episode was going to be. Like, he basically convinced them that it's time for them to not just be so passive, and they need to stand for what they believe.
It could have been that. You're right. There's a few scenes where that could have happened, but yeah, it didn't go that way.
Anyways, High Plains Drifter, check it out.
Good recommendation.
Yeah, if it's 1973, go see it in the theaters.
All right, I'm gonna run us through Hobbs' story now, because I think that's like kind of the second story that makes the most sense to get into.
Mm-hmm.
He also wakes up in the field after the explosion, and the Sisterhood has healed him, but they've just left him in the field.
I guess that's what's happened, or he actually didn't get injured. I thought that's what I thought. He wasn't injured at all.
I think they actually show them healing him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that is weird then.
They took Pinocchio, left him. It doesn't really matter. I guess they just needed this so something could happen to Hobbs this episode.
Right.
And when he's in the field, a soldier who's scouting ahead for the military kind of spots him in the field. Sergeant Escalante.
Yeah, I liked him.
Did you recognize the actor?
Yeah, is he in Breaking Bad?
Yeah, he as Raymond Cruz. He plays Tuco in Breaking Bad.
That's what I thought he was from, but I couldn't quite remember.
He's a really good actor, so I was excited that he was in this episode. I'm like, this is great.
And spoiler, he's in the next one too.
Yeah, I know, a repeating character.
Yeah. Well, we have to make sure that Florence doesn't get much to do, so you have to keep adding characters.
That's true. You wouldn't want her to have stuff going on in her life.
She at least has a third of an episode on this one, right? So that's more than she deserves.
That's her whole season.
That's her whole season right there.
Yeah, so Sergeant Escalante spots him in the field and kind of chases him out there, which is very funny that Hobbs runs back into the minefield.
Yeah.
But they essentially end up in the exact same situation. They're both end up on the same mine, just like what happened with Pinocchio like 10 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Less than that?
Yeah. He basically, that's how dumb Hobbs is. He just got blown up by a mine, and what does he do? He goes on top of another mine. That's just classic Hobbs. He's so far the dumbest character I think we've seen in any TV show.
Certainly any of the ones we've watched so
yeah,
far.
That's true.
So yeah, they're back on top of a mine, except this time Hobbs is like, I guess in the theme of this episode, he gets really, really preachy to this soldier. And he starts telling him he's going to save them from this mine to teach him about how there's a higher power in Harsh Realm.
Yeah, this is the thing. For some reason in this episode, Hobbs is really, really pushing it. And you would think that in the previous episode, something had happened that had given him this awakening,
religious
conversion.
Fanaticism?
Yeah, but it's not like something had happened and he almost died and he saw an image or something. It's just this episode, he just feels this way. And it's kind of gone by the next episode. So it's just a weird character trait that it's not set up in any way, and it's never ending in this episode. He just goes on and on. He's like a missionary, and you're stuck with him, and that's all he's like, hey, did you hear the good news? You're like, oh, okay, yes, I did hear the good news.
It's true. It's very much like that. There's no reason for him to start talking about it. He just can't stop talking about it.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is. He just keeps going on about. But here was the other plot I thought also could have been a pretty cool thing that they kind of quashed right away, which is the idea that two guys, it's sort of a bottle episode, two guys are stuck together, and in this case, they're stuck in one spot on a bomb, and neither one can move. This was a cool thing. You could have learned a little bit about Hobbs, you could have learned a little bit about the other guy, and their different ways of doing things, and their different ways of looking at stuff, and then, obviously, their differences, they realize that together they can solve this problem.
Well, this is just that movie, Enemy Mine.
Oh, I don't know that one. What's that?
It's a sci-fi movie where a human is battling an alien race. They crash on a planet together, and they have to learn to work together to survive.
Right.
It's a classic sci-fi premise.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
But yeah, that could have been this. That's really not what happens. I mean, this time Hobbs actually manages to defuse the mine, so they get off of it alive.
Second time's a charm for him.
Yeah, he gets sorted out. He just needs some practice. After he defuses the mine, he kind of walks Escalante back to his Jeep and holds him at gunpoint, kind of disables his Jeep so that Escalante can't go get help for himself. And then
he didn't mention, the whole time he's doing it, he basically keeps going I know I'm going to be able to defuse the bomb because I have faith, and you don't have faith, you should have faith. And it was just okay, move on. And then, of course, to justify his obnoxiousness, he does defuse the bomb. And he's like, see, told you.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you should just assume that Hobbs is spouting off about how there's a higher power if he's talking in this episode at all.
And again, there's been no indication that that's the case, and there's been nothing done or that happens that would give the viewer any indication that this is true, other than he just keeps saying it.
Yeah. So anyway, he kind of abandons Escalante at his broken vehicle and runs off to find either Pinocchio or Florence or whomever. It's not clear where he's going. But that brings us basically back around to the final plot in this episode for Florence. After she kind of left the minefield and like went running off, she kind of finds an old farmhouse where I guess she thinks maybe the sisterhood is.
Yeah, people keep showing up at the barn.
Yeah. But what she does find there is this really like nebbish looking suspicious guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, are you a healer? Can you help my son?" And he like shows her to his wife who's holding her son, and her son's like acting sick. And while she's looking at him, he just hits her in the head with a 2x4.
Yeah.
He hits Florence in the head.
And what I like, by the way, two things. One, she didn't sense the danger at all, so good power. And secondly, this seems like a really stupid plan, but this guy does it twice, and it works like twice.
Yeah, he keeps going back to this plan. It's his go-to. Having knocked her out, we're introduced to, I think, it must be the third bounty hunter we've seen on this show.
Yeah, there's a lot of bounty hunters.
Yeah, they're all over Harsh Realm.
Is this the bounty hunter that is wearing a cloak?
No, that's not a bounty hunter.
Oh, who is that guy?
I was about to ask you the same question. But yeah, this bounty hunter wants to find the whole sisterhood and kill them to appease Santiago or something. Like, all these bounty hunters have no idea what they're up to.
It's just something to do in I was going to say Riverworld. It's just something to do in Harsh Realm.
Just got to kill that time.
Yeah, exactly.
But since Florence is a mute, the dad who's tricked her there has a plan of how they can figure out where the sisterhood is, because she knows she just can't tell them. She introduces a new character, which this is who I was going to ask you to try to explain, but apparently you're not even sure who he was.
I assumed first it was the cloak guy from Riverworld who kept stabbing people in the forehead to give images, because he looked the same. I assumed it was a crossover.
Well, he is dressed like a Jedi, basically.
Right. And he looks a little bit like Quasimodo, but he's also mixed with Fagin because he likes stealing young boys.
Yeah, they take off his hood and he's like got a very mutated kind of Elephant Man style face.
Yeah.
But he apparently has the ability to read minds.
Because, sure, why not?
Yeah, it's sort of a new ability introduced in Harsh Realm. He holds his hand onto Florence's face, reads her mind, and in exchange for the location of the sisterhood, he wants a price paid, and that price is the little boy.
Which is obviously a little bit creepy. But so did I miss it? Who is he? Is he's just a guy?
He is just a mind reader who people are aware of in Harsh Realm.
Right. And his he just loves little boys.
Well, he didn't ask for the little boy, to be fair. The bounty hunter just gave the little boy to him as payment.
Right.
But he seemed very happy with that payment.
Right. Yeah, fine, I'll take the boy.
And now that this bounty hunter knows where the sisterhood is, he takes Florence and they go off to go kill or arrest the rest of the sisterhood. And that's kind of where our plots start to dovetail together again. Because quickly after they leave, Hobbs catches up with them and kind of gets the drop on the bounty hunter.
Yeah.
But as soon as he gets the drop on the bounty hunter, Sergeant Escalante is also back, and he gets the drop on Hobbs.
Yeah, and I was rooting for Escalante.
Yeah, so Hobbs' rescue attempt lasts, conservatively, about 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's probably more like 5 seconds. He's the worst.
And now, both Florence and Hobbs are kidnapped by this bounty hunter and Escalante.
Unrelated, weren't you hoping that Hobbs was going to never get his leg back and that he'd have a robotic leg? That's what I was hoping. I was like, how cool would it be? He has a robotic leg from now on.
That would be pretty good.
But yeah, trust me, this show would not reward you with any sort of science fiction like that at all.
So yeah, I mean, this is actually where they catch up to Pinocchio's storyline, because they get to the sisterhood's hideout and Pinocchio's been preparing for them to arrive. So he's like got cover and he starts like firing at the bounty hunter and they start shooting back.
Yeah.
And Pinocchio gets winged by a bullet, so he drops his gun. And the bounty hunter and Escalante rush the sisterhood so they can, like, I guess, kill Pinocchio before he gets his gun back. But one more thing that the sisterhood can do is revealed is they can sense where mines are and then move them to their own compound as protection.
Yeah.
As
that's
they
something.
rush in, the bounty hunter steps on a mine. It explodes and throws him high into the air.
As mines do.
And he digitizes to death. Sergeant Escalante is thrown aside and injured, and the day is sort of saved. And Florence chooses, out of the goodness of his heart, or the goodness of her heart, to heal Escalante, at which point he kind of, finally sees this higher power because he's been healed.
And the somewhat manic pixie girl of the sisterhood uses all of her power for no reason, which is really a waste if you think about all the other people she can heal. But she uses the remaining bit of her power, her life force, to give Pinocchio back a leg, and then she dies, and he's all like, wow, I barely knew her.
Yeah, that as his reward for saving them, she sacrifices her own life to grow him a new leg.
Yeah, and also, not only did I hope he was going to have a robotic leg, I was going to hope that he would still be ungrateful, and he looks down, he's like, my leg was much more muscular than this, or like he'd complain in some way. My toenails are long.
Well, that doesn't happen, but what does happen is we get to sort of cut back to Hobbs' narration where he's sort of talking about how he and everyone have sort of found God now. Like there's this real sense in his narration that they're all reborn in this new knowledge of this higher power in Harsh Realm.
Right.
And they catch up to the mutant mind reader who's taken the boy, him, Hobbs, and what's his name? Sergeant Escalante catch up to this mind reader in order to rescue the boy so he doesn't go off to, I don't know, whatever weird slavery was his destiny. I don't know. What do you think he was going to do with that boy?
Didn't that feel so tagged on though? It was just like, oh yeah, now we found this guy. I was like, what? Where are they? It just felt like someone at one point was like, hey guys, you just let that boy go with the guy. We gotta shoot a scene where they get the boy back.
No, you know what it is? I know why they shot the scene. It's
Why?
because they introduced a big twist at the end.
What was that twist?
The twist is the mind-reading mutant says, Florence thinks that you, Hobbs, are the savior, but she's wrong.
Yeah, that's the best part of the episode. I can't believe I forgot that. Sorry.
That's the best part of the episode, that Hobbs isn't the savior?
Yeah, because my hope is that it's going to be someone else and I don't have to look at him again anymore.
I have a theory. I know who the savior is. I have a big theory.
Do you?
It's Pinocchio.
I think Pinocchio's the savior.
Pinocchio has to learn from Hobbs' goodness to become the savior he's destined to be.
Oh, I hope it's Sophie, and this is all for naught because she was killed in the first episode.
Let me guarantee you one thing. No woman in this show is the savior. The writers would never do that.
Yeah, you're right. So what do we think?
The writers of the show would never allow that to happen.
Okay, well, I guess we're on to episode 108 then.
Yeah, you want me to know episode 8 here?
Yeah.
Cincinnati.
We have might. We have strength. Arrogance. What these men have is fearlessness and pride. And those are qualities you can't break, Major. You must erase them. Look this enemy in the eye with a pride and a fearlessness to match his own. Look right into the eyes of their greatest warriors and show him you are greater. You must strike and count your coup. Only then will you defeat him.
Hobbs and Pinocchio attempt to stop Santiago as he attempts to kill an American Indian terrorist leader.
And I'm going to say something, and I can't remember if I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, so if I have, I apologize. But there's something about this show, and it's not only this show, but it's something that happens a lot that I find really cuts the drama as opposed to what they think it's escalating, which is the amount of guns. And this is not like a anti-gun sort of speech I'm going on, although, come on, people. But in Harsh Realm, every scene, it's always like, everyone ends up just like grabbing guns and shooting each other. And it's the least interesting way in and out of situations. It reminded me of way back when Lost was on. The show was kind of interesting, and then at some point, there was like just a shipment of guns came onto the show. So every single conflict ended up with two people just pointing guns at each other. And I'm just like, guys, this is so boring. And this show just resorts to it over and over and over. Am I wrong?
Oh, I mean, that's an interesting theory about it. I hadn't really thought about it, but I mean, you might not be wrong.
Of all the tension you could build, of all the character building, it's like, two characters point a gun at them. I was like, just use something else. Have, like something more interesting. At least do.
Right. That's fair.
I
mean, yeah, it's a bit of a cliche.
Anyways, that's my rant done. Sorry about that.
I've debated how to open this explanation for this episode, but I think I'm gonna mention very briefly. It starts on a cold open that really teases the end of the show.
I think that's the first time they've done this. Is it?
I think they've done cold opens kind of before, but not to this extreme where they show you where you're going.
Yeah, they show you the end of the episode, then they're like, how did we get here?
Yeah, and it's because the cold open shows Hobbs pulling a bag off the head of a prisoner he has, and they have Santiago. They've captured Santiago.
Yeah.
Which sort of sets you up for like, how did we get here?
And I thought it was pretty good. I was like, cool, that's interesting.
It certainly was a good lead-in. I was just like, oh, we're going to see some real plot momentum here, I guess. And we really do. For all this episode's faults, and it has many, this is a very plot, like, where some shows spun their wheels, this has too much stuff to get through. In fact, it's so much stuff that it doesn't even give time for the interesting suspense to build, because there's no time to wait. They just keep pushing the narrative forward. There's too much narrative.
I agree. This almost feels like they had a book and someone said, well, can you take everything that happens in the book and just cut it down to 10 minutes? Because it just felt like it never stopped.
Yeah, Chris Carter wrote this episode, and he clearly had too many ideas for one episode, and he fit them in. And I mean, I thought the last episode was narration heavy. This one has so much VO.
Yeah, it's almost unstoppable. I think I wrote the note at least 3 or 4 times, like, just stop with the narration. It felt like, and I don't think this was the case, but it felt like they didn't shoot enough scenes, so they had to keep putting in voiceover to explain stuff. And maybe that is the case, but it's unrelenting.
They just
constant.
didn't have enough time in the episode to get into all of it. Like, they needed the VO to explain people's motivations, why they moved places, because there wasn't time in the runtime.
Yeah, like, there's one
to
part
shoot the scene.
There's literally one part where I can't remember where they are, but it's like a character walking. He's like, so what happened was I ended up grabbing the guy, then I caught a cab and I went over here, and then we talked about it. It's like, you're telling me all this? This is a visual medium. Why am I not seeing this? But you're right. There just wasn't enough time, but it's unrelenting.
It's very exposition heavy for sure. And it's really funny because all of this has been set up as Hobbs' narration to his wife, but he's narrating scenes he has no access to, like, that he would never know information about.
I never even thought about it. You're right.
It's a very inelegant episode as a result.
That's a good way of saying it. Yes, it is inelegant. But to be fair, so is Harshram.
Well, that's true. It's not much different from the rest of the series, I guess. Essentially, the episode kicks off properly with Santiago, and he's kind of taken over most of the eastern seaboard until he's gotten to Cincinnati, which is a kind of a cool concept. For this first time, we get the sense that he's slowly taking over America. Like, he doesn't own the whole thing. Like, He's actually on an offensive. And I kind of wished, I'm like, oh, why didn't we get to learn more about, like, this slow offensive he's building? Like, it feels like on the show he's already owns everything, but apparently in the background, it's all been, like, a slow build over the last, like, 8 episodes of what he's slowly managed to, like, gain control of.
What I thought was that only a portion was actually populated. I didn't think the rest of the world is, but they've sort of implied that the entire world is there, and he's just slowly taking it over.
Well, in this episode, they implied that recently the U.S. government has collapsed. That's why Santiago is able to do this, that he's been slowly expanding across states.
Yeah.
Like, it implies a much more interesting story in this episode than we've been given the opportunity to watch.
And it's funny, it's not that there hasn't been time to build this world, but I think the show as a whole is still kind of figuring out what it finds interesting. And is it these sort of little small bits of the world where you kind of meet new characters and there's sort of a episode about, like the doubling episode or whatever happens, or is it about the overall arc? And it's sort of in between those two, and neither very satisfying.
I guess it's sort of serialized television, so serialized elements end up taking a backseat to just the standalones. But it hurt. It should have been far more serialized than it even is.
I agree with you, but I actually find the individual episodes, the episodic episodes, actually more interesting.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if overall I agree with that. I think I would have enjoyed it more if it had at least settled into what its serialization was, instead of like feeling unsure what those were and then doiling them out occasionally.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, there is a definite sense of starter and start with them all. Like you get a bit and they go, okay, we're into something else. And then nothing is ever resolved.
Anyway, getting back to Cincinnati, his sort of westward expansion has been stopped because there's an armed First Nations resistance has kind of come in and overthrown his takeover of Cincinnati, and they've taken over Cincinnati, which I thought was an interesting concept. I mean, we'll talk about this now. Anytime I refer to anyone as like Indigenous or First Nations or anything like that in this episode, just know that Chris Carter called them an Indian.
It's a little bit of product of its time. You have to remember this is nearly 20 years ago now.
Well, I looked into it a bit, and it was still out of date at that time. But I think what it is, I think maybe in the U.S. there's a little more. It's used still a little more interchangeably. It's not quite as in Canada. I think we're a little more sensitive to it, and we try not to use it. I mean, I don't think that's a great excuse. I think Chris Carter sort of respects his characters who are Indigenous in this episode, but he also kind of like a little bit fantasizes about them too.
Luke, you trying to tell me that the Cincinnati Reds shouldn't have a native Indian as their mascot? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I think it's time, Jordan. Time for a change.
Am I supposed to believe that someone's culture is not supposed to be a mascot and a logo? Come on. Fake news.
Listener, I know it's hard to believe that two guys talking about science fiction TV series on a podcast are the whitest guys you know. But Jordan is a very, very white man, as he says.
And you know what? I'm going to mention, obviously I'm joking. Courtney, on our previous episode, really was concerned that things I say, people are taking seriously. I'm clearly joking, right? Everyone knows I'm joking.
Write in and tell us if you think Jordan is joking.
Hey, can't you tell from my voice? Anyway.
That monotone drone.
Yeah, I always think I'm very expressive, but apparently not.
You're basically a robot, right?
Yeah. Well, do you know what this show could use? Me then. Something.
Yeah, a good robot.
A good robot in this show.
So, yeah, this First Nations resistance is taking over Cincinnati. Santiago's basically wants to, he respects them for doing it, but he needs to take Cincinnati back. And so at this point, we catch up, finally, with the heroes of the show. It's been, a long time since we've seen them, actually, in this episode.
Can I interrupt for one moment? At one point, they're at the little his little war room or whatever he calls it, and and they're discussing the offensive by the natives. Waters is arguing with him, and at one part, Waters goes, "We could take them with one quick stroke." And I was desperate for Santiago to make the joke, I hear that's all it takes for you, one quick stroke, am I right? But no one made the joke, and I was like, come on, guys. Wouldn't it be funny if Santiago was also zinging people, but they can't say anything back because he's so powerful?
Oh, it could use some punch-ups this show. A few jokes here and there.
Anyway, Chris Carter, give me a call.
Yeah, but as I was saying, we catch up with Hobbs, Pinocchio, and Florence kind of for the first time this episode, and they're getting back together with Sergeant Escalante from the last episode. He's now their inside man, and he tells them Santiago is basically planning to personally assassinate the First Nations leader to stop the uprising. That's his plan. Is he wants to do it himself because he feels that will crush them the quickest.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense why he wants that, but they really push hard on that. It's because he's a warrior and because blah blah blah.
Yeah, it's because Santiago's such a gamesman. It has to be personal.
Yeah, it's got to be him.
You're right. It's not really a great reason, but it kind of sets off the episode. Because what we come to find out is this First Nation leader knows that people are going to be coming for him, so he and his men are getting prepared for the oncoming onslaught. And he kind of has one main soldier that he talks to all the time. I had to look; he's never named in the episode, so I had to look up his name on IMDb. And Chris Carter gave him the name The Brave on IMDb.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But interestingly, though, the character is played by Michael Greyeyes. Do you know this actor?
I don't think I do. I was actually trying to wonder if I could recognize him, but I don't think I do. Who is he?
He's an actor named Michael Greyeyes, who's actually a pretty cool and getting much larger Canadian actor. He was the co-lead with Jessica Chastain in Woman Walks Ahead that came out this year.
Okay.
And he actually is in the next season of True Detective.
He's by far one of the more interesting characters in this episode, way more interesting than the main characters, which is another problem on this show. Usually the people who come in for one episode are more interesting than the characters we have to live with every day.
Oh man, a great actor being wasted in a very small role.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're going to be prepared for when Santiago attacks, and since Hobbs, Pinocchio, and Florence know Santiago's going to attack, and Escalante's telling them where he's going to attack, they actually get there first and set up an ambush on Santiago inside of Santiago's own ambush on the First Nations leader.
I think this is the first time that Hobbs and Pinocchio and Florence have actually tried to do anything against Santiago. Because the whole time they're always talking about how dangerous he is and blah, 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 and it's their mission, and Hobbs is like, I can't go because I got to do this. But he never actually attempts to actually kill or capture Santiago until now. Episode 8.
They're always finding reasons they need to find someone else to do it. This is the first time they're making an attempt.
Yeah, and it's not a bad plan. I mean, I don't know if it's the most well thought out plan because it's contingent on someone else's plan, but at least they're,
it's true.
At least they're moving things into action.
It's a very brute force plan. They essentially just plant a whole bunch of explosives where Santiago has to stand to get this armored convoy off the road,
and hoping that he stands on a landmine essentially.
And as the raid happens, Santiago does almost step on the bomb, but unlucky for them, he catches the bomb he looks down at the last second and sees it in the ground. So just before it explodes, he grabs one of his own soldiers and uses that soldier as a shield.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good moment.
So it was actually not a bad attempt on their part. Obviously fails because Santiago has to keep living, but not too bad. I mean, the staging of it could have been much more like suspensefully set up, but they're just churning through so much plot that it just kind of flies by in 2 seconds.
Right.
It's at this point that Michael Grey is actually, after the explosion, in all the chaos, he ends up catching and arresting Hobbs, Pinocchio, and Florence. So they're kind of taken out of the scheme. They don't know if Santiago has died, but they've basically been arrested.
And coming up now is maybe you'll disagree with me, but I think the best part of the episode is coming up.
Oh, 100%. This is the best part of the episode.
Dare I say the Questor part of the episode?
Good reference. This is a very good reference for this portion because obviously we reveal Santiago hasn't died. He's dragged the soldier who was injured in the explosion back into the forest, and he reaches into the soldier's backpack and pulls out what we're told is a digiwand.
Yeah, it kind of looks like just an electric shaver.
But apparently they just have these digiwands which just heal people like Florence does.
I know, it renders Florence's powers useless.
Totally irrelevant. Like, there's technology that can do the exact same thing, apparently. We've never seen it up till now, but they exist.
It's like her power is she can sew, and then she walks into a sewing machine factory, and she's like, oh, they have things that do this already? Oh, okay.
But this digiwand apparently has other attributes. Like, he takes it and he runs it over the soldier. This was weird. He saves the soldier's life, first of all.
I know you think Santiago's going to do something nice, but no.
No. He then, like, runs this, like, handheld shaver-looking thing, the digiwand, over the guy's mouth, and his mouth is erased.
He just erases the guy's mouth, and then he starts erasing other parts of his face.
Until he's just like, they pull away, and his whole face is like sealed up, and like, how would, like, I guess you just put like,
he looks like a putty man. He just has no features at all. He's just a round ball of a face, like he's a balloon.
Yeah,
he's a balloon.
I mean,
head.
you're right. This is just Questor when he began.
That's what he made. He did Questor in reverse. But why I mentioned Questor was because what you get then is he takes the little what did you call it?
The digiwand.
The digiwand, and he starts rolling it over his head and gives himself some hilarious hair. And then I didn't realize it at first, but I guess later on, the effect they're supposed to have is that he also kind of gave himself a slightly different face.
No, he steals the man's face.
Was that what it's supposed to be? But it didn't really look like that. It just kind of looked like he was a little bit puffy.
He has a puffy face because I think it's so weird. Sorry, I'm going to try to explain this as best I can, but I think the idea is this is kind of like a Mission Impossible face swap thing where you put on a mask and you look exactly like the person you're supposed to be. But instead of what you would normally do in this series is you just get the other actor to now step into the role. Like, I've taken over this character. Now the other actor just pretends to be Santiago in disguise.
Yeah.
What they've done is they've just made Terry O'Quinn, they've just put a bunch of like makeup on him and like prosthetics to make him look vaguely like the man he used to be, but he's quite clearly Terry O'Quinn just in like heavy makeup.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, there's no way. And for the rest of the episode, people were like, is that, like, no one knows it's Santiago. It's like, it's clearly Santiago with a bad wig.
Yeah, he just kind of has a wig and like they put some prosthetic cheekbones on him. And it's supposed to be like he's stolen this man's face. But for whatever reason, we didn't want the other we wanted Terry O'Quinn in the episode. So don't let that other actor fill in as himself. Terry O'Quinn will just be like him in disguise, like in a face mask.
And they gave the makeup person about 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's a weird choice because this is like a trope, like face swapping. But usually you don't like it. I mean, in some ways I like that. I'm like, oh, it's not a perfect face swap. He's just putting someone else's face over his, so it doesn't quite mesh. But like, it was very weird. It was a weird thing.
And here's another thing, though. And we don't need to get into the dregs with this, but when you switch bodies, let's say you switch faces, because this happens now a couple times in the episode as we go, but the people's voice change too. Your voice wouldn't change because they make it clear at one point it's just the face you're changing, because there's a bit of a reveal later where you see someone's chest. So it's the original body.
Yeah, it's the original body. And Santiego's voice doesn't change. He doesn't take on that soldier's voice.
Isn't there a thing later where someone...
Well, we have to get into that later.
Okay.
But like right now, Santiego's just put on his face. He still kind of looks like Santiago.
Yeah.
It's a bit puffy, but like it just looks like he's sort of layered someone's face over his original face.
Yeah.
And he's the same voice. So yeah, like that's the technology. It's like basically a close approximation of someone else's face.
Okay. We'll have to get into this later as we get through the episode, and you know why.
Well, I mean, I'm only stopping you because that's basically the whole episode is that reveal.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, I'm ruining your day.
No. I'm just, it's just, I get nitpicky about these things when you take a lot of time to show something and then immediately just like, oh, all those rules I set, whatever.
Well, that's what it is. They've just established the rules for this. So when we come back to it, it's going to be crazy because they break all of these rules.
Right. Okay.
Now that Santiago is effectively a different person, he goes into Cincinnati and he finds some like guy on the street and he trades his clothes with him and gives the guy his dog tags. And then immediately turns around and kind of tells like the First Nation soldiers, oh, there's a guy with a gun over here, gets the guy killed, and they like think they've killed Santiago because they find his dog tags on the corpse. Like that's the plan. That's his ploy anyway, is he makes it seem like he has been killed.
Right. And it works. They have the dog tags and everyone thinks he's been killed.
Yeah, everyone now thinks Santiago's dead. They actually like, they're so happy that they've essentially killed Santiago, is they bring Santiago in disguise back to meet the First Nations leader so that he can thank him personally for helping kill the enemy. And the First Nations leader even like offers him a job as a janitor at their headquarters, like so Santiago can get in.
Which is ludicrous, by the way. It's ludicrous that they're just like, you have a room and board, and he's like, I can work, and they're like, all right, how about be a janitor? I'm like, why would you ever do this? It's like the reason they do it because he needs Santiago to still be around and stuff. But like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, it doesn't even really make sense. Like Santiago definitely pointed the soldiers at this guy to kill him, but he didn't have anything to do with it. Like the soldiers are the heroes. Like the guy who pointed over there and said, I think there's a bad guy. Like that's not the guy you bring back to meet the leader.
And they keep sort of implying, or they don't keep, a few times it comes up that if Santiago's dead, how come the game hasn't changed? Because even Hobbs at one point says, like, we killed him, we won the game, which I know is your point, is like, that's not how video games work. But
I mean, we can get into that, but that's Hobbs. Like, that's actually comes up in this next scene here, is after Santiago kind of gets a job as a janitor at this place, we catch up with Hobbs and Pinocchio and Florence, and actually Escalante is with them now, and basically they're being strung up to be hung as like bad guys. They don't know they're not soldiers. They're like, let's hang these guys and get it over with.
They're like, just in case. It's basically like, we don't know if you're with Santiago or you're not, but we're just going to hang you either way is basically what it is.
And the entire time they're about to hang these people, Hobbs he's not worried about them being hung. He literally spends his whole time talking about like, well, if Santiago's dead, why is the game still running? And just like, nothing you've seen so far would tell you the game would just stop when you kill it. Like, he just still doesn't, like, it doesn't make any sense what his argument is.
In classic Hobbs fashion, he's just the most confused person in the room at all times. And he's just always like, why? What doesn't happen? Like, he's just like, Like, in his mind, they kill Santiago and then the game just shuts down. Nothing in this game has indicated that would ever, like, it's still a running simulation. Like, I could just see having lunch with him, and every time he takes a bite, he's like, where'd the food go? And you're like, well, you've eaten it, it's in your stomach, it's digesting. But where's the sandwich? That's what he's like, having around.
I was extremely frustrated by that. Like, that's exactly what it was like hearing him talk.
Yeah, he's annoying.
As they're about to get hung, Florence actually, like, rescues them. And what is probably the most heroic thing that's ever happened on this show is they're about to get hung, and she chokes the dude out with her legs as she's hanging from the noose and like escapes her noose. Like, she is a badass. She's everything these other characters should be.
Yeah, she's the coolest character. They don't know what to do with her. And it's just, yeah, you're right. It was a cool scene, actually. It was really well done. She attacks the one guy. She gets herself in a noose, saves everyone. And it's just like, well, another day for Florence. No credit.
She's the only capable person, and it was a cool scene. I was like, this is awesome. Why is there not more Florence in this show? And
so we move on to I think just more Santiago as a janitor. I was kind of hoping he was going to stay undercover for years, like really play the long game, but this episode has too much happening.
Well, it's very funny because after they escape from getting hung, the first thing they do is, like, our heroes, like Hobbs and Pinocchio and Florence, with their new friend Escalante, they just invade the First Nations headquarters. Like, I don't know why.
And it wasn't clear, again, because this episode has some timing issues. They decide that they're going to steal the leader of the natives so that they can trade him for Santiago. Is that the plan?
That's the plan. I guess, like, it's not clear why. Like, because the game hasn't shut down, I guess Hobbs assumes that this indigenous uprising has captured Santiago, so he's not really dead. So if they kidnap their leader, then they can trade their leader for Santiago, and then they can finally kill Santiago. It's not like, it's another problem with this episode is, like, they don't spend any time explaining to us how the characters get to this conclusion. They just kind of, like, run because they have so much plot to get through.
And it's just like, they're just there and it happens.
So they kind of break in, they steal the First Nations leader. While they're doing that, though, Janitor Santiago catches a glimpse of Sergeant Escalante in a hallway, and he realizes, oh, hey, my soldiers betrayed me. So he just murders him in the hallway.
Also, I just like that you said Janitor Santiago. How wouldn't that be a funny show? You have all this back history of all this thing. It's Harsh Realm. You have to get all this, but it's just because it's just him as a dictator, but he's stuck living his life as a janitor. That's a funny show.
That would have just been season 2, him as a janitor.
Well, no Hobbs. I'd be fine with it.
I'm going to stop us here real quick just to go back, because I think we kind of dropped this thread last podcast. But last episode, it's not Hobbs this time who killed the VC character, but that sister did sacrifice herself for Pinocchio.
Right.
So that would put us at 6 out of 7 episodes a sidekick has died.
Oh, that's right.
The only one hasn't died in is the one with the doppelgangers in the lake. Nobody died in that one. No, the family all gets away alive.
You're right. Yeah. So, well, he has a pretty bad record is what we're saying.
Yeah. But in this episode, for the first time, I guess, a character who is not a VC, they kill this soldier. Oh,
yeah, because he's not a VC, is he?
Yeah, they actually get a real person killed this time. This is their first real person sidekick they've killed. But that actually puts it, that's 7 out of 8 episodes where the sidekick is killed.
Well, and again, and you know what? Maybe that answers the questions why they don't give Florence more scenes, because she'd just be dead if she had those scenes, you know? So it's like, oh, well,
she knows if she spoke, she would die.
Yeah, she actually can speak. She's just like, I'm just going to keep to myself, do my own thing.
She's like, I've seen what happens here.
Yeah.
But this basically sets us up to start moving toward the, like, cold open we saw, because after all this chaos at the headquarters, Michael Greyeye sort of returns to the episode, and he busts into the headquarters trying to find out what's happened, what are the commotions about. And as he comes into the room, he sees Santiago has been injured in sort of the attack to kidnap the leader. And he goes to help Santiago because he thinks it's like he's on their side. And as he's looking at his wound, he notices that Santiago has one of the chips in his chest. Hence, he's from Santiago's land, so he knows he's a soldier in Santiago's army. Quick question about that, though. Why did Santiago chip himself?
I thought the exact same thing. It's a weird reveal it's like, why would he ever need to do that?
They just basically needed to clue this guy in that this guy isn't who he said he was. But the dictator would never chip himself.
What he should have done is he should have taken off his pants and been like, that penis looks familiar.
That's what he should have done.
Everyone knows what Santiago, he has it all over the place. Everyone knows what his penis looks like.
He just sends a lot of dick pics everywhere.
Everywhere. He can't stop. Well, he's the dictator. He can do whatever he wants.
He's the dictator.
You know what's funny? I didn't even think of that pun, so well done.
I beat you to your own pun.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I regret everything. So now that it's kind of been revealed that this guy is not on their side, like, it's really weird. Santiago pulls a knife on Michael Greyeye, and he's just like, here's what we're going to do. You're going to trade me for your leader back.
Yeah, he's like, I know you just thought I looked exactly like Santiago with slightly puffier cheeks, but guess what? I am Santiago with slightly puffier cheeks.
And I want you to trade me for your leader. Like, it's a very weird, it doesn't make a lot of sense, the scene.
And now let me ask you, what was Santiago's actual plan? Because he sort of said from the beginning, I have a plan. I want to be the one who's going to kill the leader myself. And he kind of goes through that, but there's no way this was his plan to accidentally have someone get blown up by a landmine, then steal his face, then go become a janitor. Like, that was not his plan. So he's kind of playing it by ear, but they sort of make it seem like he's fine with that the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, his plan was fairly flexible. His only plan was, I'm going to personally kill this man. So the first time he was going to get him in the ambush. When that didn't work, he became a janitor, and he was going to kill him as a janitor.
Right. Oh, yeah, there's a scene, right.
Yeah, because he gets really close to him at some point when he's a janitor with a knife, but it just doesn't work out. And now that he's been kidnapped by Hobbs, Santiago now has to change his plan because he still has to kill this guy. That's like, Santiago is very focused.
Anyway, so what's the next scene?
Well, this is basically where we start off now, is we cut to Hobbs showing up, and he's like, hey, I will trade you Santiago for your leader because I know you have Santiago, which there's no way he knew that, but that's fine. It's the only way that gets us where we're going.
God told him.
We now see Santiago in this hood over his head. They drive out and make the exchange, exchanging Baghead Santiago for the Aboriginal leader. As they're about to kill Santiago, they pull the gag out of his mouth and Santiago suddenly shouts, "I'm not Santiago, you've been tricked."
Which we all saw.
Yeah, it's not a big surprise. Like, this, obviously they weren't going to kill Santiago. But, like, what was a surprise is this is what you were talking about earlier. They break their own rules about how face swapping works at this point.
Yeah, because wouldn't a Santiago had to have taken his own face and put it on the guy?
Yeah, this guy should look like who he was with a slight Santiago face. But what it is, it's Terry O'Quinn now Mission Impossible style. Like, that's how good the mask is. And he's got his own voice. What we've seen up till now is the face isn't that good and you keep your own voice.
Well, here's the thing.
But, you know, it's...
But I'd even be fine with it. But if the technology is you take a face from someone and put it onto someone else, the face he should have taken then was the guy to put on the new guy would have been the soldier's dead face, because his face is gone now, right? Do you know what I mean? There is no Santiago face because he's erased his, and that's it.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess his face is under the face? I don't know.
It's weird to introduce a technology and then literally break its own rules within a couple minutes.
Yeah, they change its rules within the episode in order to make their turn work. And so basically what's happened is Santiago has stolen Michael Greyeye's face. He's gotten the leader back. They drive off and Santiago, like, shoots him in the head on the drive back. Hence, like, killing him and basically crushing the uprising. And, like, that's kind of the end. Santiago won, basically.
Yeah.
And I think at the end, we kind of get a quick shot of Santiago rubbing the Digi-1 on his face again, and somehow he's gotten his face back.
And I like also that he's sitting. It is such a silly thing, but it's the reveal that he's going to be back, and you see the back of Terry O'Quinn's, the back of him, and you can see that he looks like he's shaving, so he's clearly doing stuff. But what I like is that that's what he waited to do last. He got dressed, he got into the office, he sat down, he did some paperwork, then he was like, "Oh right, I guess I should put my face on." Like, you think that'd be the first thing?
I've got the wrong face right now.
Yeah, like you think that'd be the first thing you do is put your face back on.
I mean, he didn't see a mirror for a while. He forgot. He changed faces. But yeah, that wraps up these two episodes. I mean, any thoughts on these two episodes? I mean, like, episode 7 was very, like, they really dug into the sort of the mythology of the show and really correlated it with some very religious heavy overtones, which hadn't been too obvious so far. Like, it really changes what this show feels like now.
Well, what do you think of that first episode? What would you give that one?
I mean, it wasn't a bad episode. I mean, I think it's like a 6 for me.
You know what? I'm going to give it the exact same 6. If only because I think there was some potential in this episode that they didn't quite achieve. Overall, it wasn't a bad episode. There's no question. It was super heavy-handed throughout, and it was a little bit annoying, just if only because it seemed inconsistent with the rest of the series. But I didn't think it was a bad episode. At least it was paced pretty well.
It wasn't a bad episode of TV, for sure. Or it's definitely not a bad episode of Harsh Realm.
I'd agree with that.
And then, like, episode 8, I didn't hate it. Like, I actually think the core plot was probably a good one that probably should have been broken into, like, it was just too much. It should have been broken into 2 episodes and given it some room to breathe and, like, let some plans come together, and, like, the plans fall apart and they have to build new plans, and, like, the stakes are constantly shifting and adjusting. I think it could have worked. It just didn't, because it kind of was jammed together too quickly a little too haphazardly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to give that one, I think that one is a 7.5.
Oh, I'm going down a 5. I found it really frustrating. And,
oh, really?
And I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I think it annoyed me more than annoyed you. It just felt like everyone was making up things as they went along. And basically it was like, he had the real turn. That was all they had. And it's like, well, here's a bunch of wasted time till we get there.
I guess I'm reading between the lines. Like, I think there was a full and interesting couple episodes there that just, like, they didn't want it to be the finale, so they kind of just jammed it into one episode. I don't know. It didn't work, but I thought at least it was the best version of the show I've seen so far.
I was kind of hoping that Santiago would die and there would be some changes and ramifications of those changes, and that we would have the resolve in episode 9. But I think I'm asking too much for a show that didn't know they were going to get canceled. And I have a feeling, now we haven't watched it, that the next episode is going to end on some sort of cliffhanger, or at worst is just going to be like a normal standalone episode where we don't learn anything. But my hope was that this was kind of setting up for the end, but I don't think we're going to get that.
I agree. I hope it's a cliffhanger. That would be great. I'm all on board with that. But I'm excited to see how it all ends next week. It's going to be fun to watch the final episode.
Well, on that note, I think we're done with 7 and 8.
Yeah, I guess that's it for this episode of Continuum Drag. If there's anything you want to tell us about Harsh Realm or anything else we've watched, you can get a hold of us at continuumdrag@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at continuumdrag. Jordan has been putting up some great little animated gifs, so I think there's a couple good ones in this episode. We'll see how it goes. But I guess until next time, Jordan.
We'll see you then.
Continuum Drag is recorded at Astrolab Studios in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rick-Siedler. Produced by Jordan Delic and Luke Black. Special thanks to Adam Wheatner, Jeff Hanley, Emily Carter, and Dwayne Wright.